founders of I Am Perspective, and we are so proud to be here up at WEMS Radio, WEMSradio.com, to launch our inaugural I Am Perspective radio show. So excited, so excited. Thank you for being here. Thank you for checking us out. We have a jam-packed day of conversations. We have a special guest, and we're going to get right into it.
Yeah, so since this is our first show, we do want to just give a little bit of background of what I Am Perspective is. I Am Perspective was founded in December 2017 as a platform for creating one-on-one dialogues, basically bringing people face-to-face to have genuine human connection and have very important conversations. And so we are very excited to now be bringing this platform over to radio because we can now come into your homes and reach even more people. We have a very special guest with us here today, and then we're going to be introducing him.
Yeah, so we've been doing these events as a lot of people who've been following us and cheering us on and supporting us around New York City. We've been bringing people together, strangers, kinfolk, family, neighbors, and getting them to talk, have one-on-one conversations, peel themselves away from the internet and the comments and the scrolling and everything, which we all do. No knock to everybody, but this is not what this show is. But we've been for over 2 years now, Nussy and I just been having these conversations on the ground, in halls, in wherever we could fit people. And so now to move to this platform on the radio, man, we get to cover so much. We get to bring special guests in and really dig further into these conversations we're having out in the street.
So here at I Am Perspective, we believe that everyone has a perspective to share, right? So we're looking for people from representing all different backgrounds. Everyone that comes to one of our events has an opportunity to show. They will share, actually, right? If you're coming to one of our events, we expect for you to have a perspective that you want to share and not just there to listen. And with that being said, I believe this man has a lot of perspective to share with us, and I'm really excited to hear from him. He's not one to share so openly, so I'm really excited for this conversation.
That's how you put somebody on the radio. Right on the radio.
So, no other than, this is Jeremy Britton. He's the founder of Impact and a master coach and facilitator. Thank you, Jeremy, for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I'm the single applause. I'm very grateful. Jeremy hasn't been feeling good. He's a little under the weather, so to have him out, in those New York cold streets to get here, we appreciate you being here with us.
Absolutely. I appreciate you all, and thank you all for having me on as the first guest on I Am Perspective Radio.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Yes.
So, one of the reasons I thought of you for our first episode is that you have done some work yourself in the racial equity justice field. So if you could just tell us a little bit more about that and what you've done in the past.
Gotcha. Thank you. So when I look at racial equity and justice, I look at justice, period. And one thing for me is, seeking justice, seeking racial justice, seeking justice when it comes to gender, when it comes to sexuality and across the board. So I try to incorporate these conversations into everything that I do. As you all know, I facilitate personal development workshops, and in those type of workshops, everything that you can think of comes into the conversations that we have. Yes. Every issue, every challenge, and one of the more challenging conversations when it comes up is around racial equity. That tends to tighten people up in the room. That's the conversation that tends to make people uncomfortable. That's the conversation that, for some, they jump into it, and for others, they stay away from it. So whenever it comes up, I try to, I attack it head on, because I think it's a great platform to have the conversation, to bring in various perspectives, and to land on the same page to move forward in the conversation.
Well, now, with your experience, why do you think, of all the things that could trigger people the most, that race gets people really clenched up?
Because we live in the United States of America.
Right. Okay.
when we
Facts
just,
as is.
yeah, I think that simply states it right there when we look at the racial history of this country. The injustices due to racial inequalities dating back to, slavery in its traditional sense, and even in the slavery, um, the the current space of slavery that we live in right now.
Mm, absolutely. When I think about why we did the episode like this, racial equity and equality in America, it's because race has really been at the center of us creating Iron Perspectives. You know, we have to. Nussy and I are from, and I love the fact that we get this platform now that we get to really talk about how we really brought this up in the different worlds that we really are from. We've been friends for over 20 years, known her. We're both from Queens, come from this world of Queens that has all this diversity, but we've had to have like several layers of conversation about race to do this work properly, you know. And I think there's a lot of people who say race and we might think black, white, yellow, or whatever people want to consider these surface levels of it. And in order to really jump into this perspective work, you know, we had to have those conversations of what does race I know what it looks like to me as a black man, but then it goes, well, what is Nussy's perspective? Like, what does race look like? And then that's been a world of uncovering and so forth. What does race look like to you? So we are on the spot.
Since we're okay, race looks like to me. So I think what you mentioned earlier, it's not as simple as being black or white or yellow or brown or whatever we call ourselves, right? As someone who identifies as Bengali American, my race, when I fill out a questionnaire, I have to fill off Asian American. What is Asian American? I don't know. It includes a whole bunch of countries, and we don't necessarily share all the same. First of all, we don't all look the same, right? So, race. I think it's really just at this point and in this point of time in this country, it's really a black and white thing, right? It's not. What are you? I think you're either white, and if you're not white, then you're some version of black or something, like you're not enough, right? So we're always...
Now, I'm gonna break our Iron Perspective rule, right? Because one of the rules in our Iron Perspective is to speak for yourself and not speak on a race. And when you and I talk, we talk from our experience of race. So you're saying like your experience of America now is kind of black and white. Do you think the Bengalis see themselves as a race, or is like a brown, or is it like a fitting in?
I think it's more of a cultural thing. Like, I think people like to identify themselves more by their nationality versus like a race. I think when you start talking about nationality, then you can actually start talking about the nuances and what people actually believe in, right? Like, Desi Americans, which consist of India, Bangladesh, and Pakistan, that's over 1 billion people. Like, that's like saying, like, Africa, like, oh, I'm African. What part of Africa? There's so many different countries, so, yeah. And actually, since you mentioned that, we are all representing our own perspectives today, so, you know, what we like to do is create safe spaces for everybody, including ourselves. So we do not believe that we have all the answers. What we're saying right now is not necessarily like the right one, right? We just have our own specific perspectives. They may change even over the course of this conversation. And so with that being said, just making a special disclaimer that we are going to speak freely and openly today. Whatever comes out.
This is how we do it. We like 10, 15 minutes in, we're gonna drop F-bombs and, you know, hey, we're free and open.
So just putting that disclaimer, that's for all of our events. With that being said, I Am Perspective was created to basically address these issues that we just talked about, right? What would it, before we get into some of the nuances, what would it look like if we had a world or a country where racial equity was a thing and it was peaceful? What's that vision? How would that hold up?
Oh, that's a great question. When I think of, and I like that you said world, because it's racial inequity exists across the world. It's a world where we all see one another and respect one another. We can see ourselves in each other. Although we come with our differences as far as ethnicities, as far as, and again, I'll name these other things because although we're talking about racial justice, I'm talking racial equity. I'm talking about equity and justice overall. Us coming from our different ethnicities, our different genders, our different sexualities and religions, exactly, and to actually see ourselves as one entity. Because at the end of the day, you know, whether I am a black man from Memphis, Tennessee, or you know, a white woman from Sweden, you know, we still have the same blood running through our veins. And for us to be able to see each other and see ourselves in one another, I think that creates the space where the world is exuded by love and respect for one another.
So you believe in the human race?
I do. I do. And when I say that, I want to be very careful with my words because I think sometimes we can speak from believing in the human race and then ignore a lot of the issues and challenges that we have. While I do believe in the human race, I do want to acknowledge everything, you know, that's not right now, you know.
Aliens, right? Everybody know about that's just me. That's how I feel. I believe in humans, right? And I just don't believe everybody here is human. You know, that's episode Iron Perspective episode 70. Y'all stick with us. We'll get that deep. No, but that might seem like a softball question to start things off. But even in that, with so much that's going on now, so many people who are genuinely looking to find other people who believe in humanity, right? Like, we didn't prompt you to say that, but I appreciate that answer.
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of people that don't understand that right now, even on the brink of real war. You know, we've always teetered around that and said that, but now we're really there to know that there are people out here who still believe in humanity, who's still going to be digging in, doing the work for the people, whether we bombing countries or at war or at peace or whatever. So, well, that's a great answer.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think our perspective here is that one of the ways of tackling what's currently happening, right, is through conversation. I don't think it's enough to just be in spaces with people of different backgrounds, because just because you're in a space with someone doesn't mean you're having that genuine human interaction. So you're not really developing like, oh, this is another human being and we're actually more alike than we are different. And so when you sit across from someone one-on-one and you're having these intimate conversations, it starts to break apart these barriers that you may have had in the past, right? And I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that we all have a bias, right? We all have been raised and preconditioned to believe something about someone some way, and maybe we don't still believe it. Maybe, you know, there was something in the past that we thought, and then we no longer think, right? So my first question to you, right? What is a perspective of yours that you had in the past that you no longer think, that has shifted because of something that you experienced later in life?
Ooh, I think I have about 10 different answers for that question. One in particular would actually be around police.
Okay.
And you can imagine being a black man, being a black person, you know, with black nieces and nephews and a black brother and a black father, just what the plight with police in general. And you know, there was a point in time where I despised them. There's just no trust, you know, there are no good policemen. I actually have a close friend back home who's a policeman, and I would always think to myself and say, okay, in uniform, not so much. When you take your uniform off, we're good. We can be cool. With the uniform on, not so much, because there was no trust there. And fortunately, I've, especially within these past few years, have had the opportunity to meet some police officers that really changed my perspective. There are rotten apples. There actually are a lot of rotten apples. but just as many rotten apples there are, ripe red and green apples ready to be eaten. And that's a horrible analogy.
I mean, somebody has to get into the field for the right reasons.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, this thing would be a clan show if there wasn't some good police out there.
Exactly. And,
We'd be in a lot of trouble.
Exactly. And what's amazing about that is I've even the very friend I'm talking about back in Memphis, we've been able to have conversations to where, the problems that exist in law enforcement, he recognizes. Some of my close friends recognize. So it's not a thing as if though this is happening, but because I'm a part of this entity, let's pretend that it's not.
Right.
And realizing that if we have these officers that are realizing these problems and are committed to the change that needs to take place, then that's some hope, that it evokes hope.
Yeah.
It leaves me in a different place as opposed to just continuous distrust. Now, I still, drive down and pass a police officer and have to make sure that I'm good. But that kind of changed the conversation.
I mean, it's a process, right? Like,
yeah.
I think
Continuous.
when you have these years of trauma and things built up, sometimes some of our biases are developed off of real events, right? And on all all spectrums, right? Like if someone got robbed by someone of a specific race, that person might be traumatized for the rest, like they have a real trauma behind it. Like why did it start? And so I think that's something that's for us very important is to get to, is that human beings are human. So even as, I think I have a lot of perspective and a lot of empathy, and I'm very, everyone gets to go kind of thing, but I also have my own biases.
Oh
right?
man, we literally created a company about perspective. You would think we know it. We got empathy. So for the people who are not doing the work, who think they have empathy, and doing the work means just going out and meeting people and really looking at life differently, changing your view about things. That takes work. We were mentioning that earlier, doing the work. It starts to become this slogan, we out here doing the work. but when it comes to the police, I'm looking at all the live streams right now. We've been looking for officers to do a perspective. A lot of people have asked us to host that and facilitate a conversation with officers. And if we were to name some of the hurdles that we've had doing the work, is that not everyone is prepared to talk. And there are legit reasons why, if you said, if there's a core of rotten apples and there's some good apples, there's but so many things you can say and convey in conversation. So we're still trying to chisel away the proper way to have conversations, because we see police out there, we see police stations and specific precincts who are out there trying to engage with the community. So
and that's a request. If you are police or in the law enforcement field and you want to speak about your perspective, we are more than happy to listen and bring you on.
Yeah, because I got a lot to say about the police. This is only episode 1. So we trying to keep my good brother in business. We trying to keep WEMS right now. We got love for all law enforcement and fire department. Shout out to my bro Mo out there holding it down for FDNY, and my cousin who is an officer, NYPD.
My brother-in-law is a sergeant.
Right. I will be honest, man. I have, just like you, I have real life trauma with the police, and it was passed down to me. I'm born and raised in New York. We went through the Reagan era and the Juliana terror, when it was real New Yorkers know what it was. It was martial law, damn near, and then before stop and frisk was some liberal shit to write about. Stop and frisk was just normal. So with all of that, I do carry a lot of feelings towards that. But then, like you said, for the work we do, I can't do this work and not know that they're good police officers.
Absolutely.
And it's not just, I think police affect all different communities, right? So you guys are black men and you guys have a specific trauma around that. So I just mentioned earlier that my brother-in-law is a sergeant. And when my sister was trying to bring him home, that was a huge conversation. Like, you do not marry the police. Like,
See, we just thought that was black people that thought like that, right? Oh, word.
But with that being said, I did want to just bring up a story. I actually didn't have. I trusted police for the most part. Like, I think if I call them, like, they'll come help me, and it could be me and my little privilege, right? Like, I think. I don't know, it was like a nice little girl, like, okay, I'll help you. So the first time I really recognized for myself the difference in how people of different communities, even in your own community, can react to the police really has to do with, like, sometimes social class. We had some tenants who got robbed, and, you know, they came to the front of the house, they're like, okay, can you, like, we just got robbed, like, what do we do? And I'm like, oh, call the police, like, that's the normal, like, reaction. I'm like, yeah. And they're looking at me like, no. And I'm like, I don't know what to do then, like, I don't know. Okay, so we did call the police, and that was the first time that I noticed how I was treated versus how other people might be treated, right? In terms of, I mean, that's not the first time I know, but, like, the first question they asked this man was, who knew that this money was there, right? Like, it was just like, it was a very, like, confrontational conversation. And I'm just like,
help.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm like looking at them, and then they're being nice to me, and I'm just like, don't be nice to me, right? Like, what do you, like, now I'm over there and I'm mad, and I'm like, I'm about to. So with that being said, have you ever been in a situation where you notice someone else being, you know, discriminated against, or being in some sort of awkward situation where you felt the need that you had to speak up or intervene or do something in that situation because maybe you had a little bit more privilege than the person that was being affected?
Yes. Something that actually happened recently. So I also do work at City College. I work in their accessibility center as a counselor, and there's a student. This is actually something that took place within the past few weeks. There's a student who is on the spectrum, and he's of Indian descent, and his professor, Jewish white guy. Okay, I'm gonna leave my actual comments to self. But this particular professor,
Go. It's just episode 1.
for lack of better terms, is a blank, and you can fill in the blank with whatever you want. And so this particular student, he feels threatened by this student of color. Anyone who actually takes the time to interact with this student, it's obvious he's on the spectrum, and at the end of the day, he's just trying to like pursue his educational
He's just trying to
dream.
navigate.
Right.
Exactly. He's just trying to be a college student.
Right.
You know, he has his aspirations of becoming a chemical engineer, and he's trying to do what he's trying to do. This professor feels threatened by this particular student to the point of he adjusts his route on campus so that he won't have to run into this student. And he, you know, there have been points where he's locked himself in the office if this student is there because he's threatened by this student. And it's just like anyone who, again, interacts with this student knows that he's harmless.
Right.
So he actually threatened to call NYPD on this student. So this took the student into a frenzy, like just to the point of like every day he's stopping by my office talking about this, and this happened in November and we're still having conversations about it. So with that, he's portraying this student as a danger, a threat.
Right.
And I'm like, no, that's not the case.
Right.
So at this point, you know, I'm having constant conversations where I'm having to advocate and speak up for this student with this professor just to, you know, get a fair shot.
Just to get him to have a regular experience.
Exactly, a regular experience, a regular interaction. This student simply wants to ask professor about questions on a test.
Right.
And, you know, if it was any other student, I'm pretty sure the professor would you know, make his time available, do exactly what he has to do. But he's making this particular student jump through hoops in order to just get this interaction that literally can take nothing more than 5 minutes. And in addition, and just talking about like intersection, not only is this a student of color, but this is a disabled student as well.
Yeah.
And you know, you're like making this student jump through hoops just to have a simple interaction.
But now that's a whole new wave that our generation is really interacting with the education of the students, because you know, I know we're about to go on break in a second, but like I remember when we were younger, we talk about the LGBTQ community, the mentally challenged, like all of these things. We just threw that in the corner. We threw that shit in the corner. You know, we put it in a lump, and now we're dealing with a society who's dealing with all of this. And this is a reason why we do what we do, because we feel like there's a bridge missing between that student and of course that professor. Now he's dealing with his own shit, and we're not therapists, and that's not what we do anyway, but
yeah,
that's why we're moving what we do from the radio into corporate settings, into school, so we can start having conversations like that.
Exactly. And I'm glad you say that, because just my experience of working with students and professors in higher education, just having this conversation and having it ahead of time as opposed to reacting to this thing could change that whole interaction.
Exactly.
Yeah, thank you for that. That was you know, when we talk about perspectives, it's not always about race, gender, religion, or sexuality. There's so many different things that unite us human beings. That's not a condition that only affects Indians or, you know, students or any particular group of people. So, we will be going on a short break right now, but we'll be coming back to some more amazing conversation and perspective.
Yeah, man. Thank you very much for staying with us and being with us in the first episode. And we'll be back in a moment.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Time is like flying.
Yeah.
Oh no, been so long since my medication, and I'm drowning in the pain. No, body soul, there's no separation, and it's driving me insane. Well, now you say it's a revelation, burning holes inside of my mind. Get some kind of elevation. Gotta help me pass the time. Help me pass the time. I'm suffocating, acting like it's all good. Baby got me hanging again. As long as you come over, I don't care where you go. As long as you come over. over.
Yo, man, suck my dick, master. Yo, man, suck my dick, master. Suck my motherfucking dick.
Hey, how you doing? Okay, listen up. Hey, little mama, can you feel the connection as soon as I walked in the room? Watching you dancing, looking all good in your little pink dress. Bless, making a rebel think less. What you gonna do when I get you out of that dress? Oh, pardon me, excuse the French in me. I'm known to speak shit all the time. Girl, don't waste no fucking time. Show me that dirty wine. More for the bumping grind, having fun, feeling free, living life so happily. It's still danger lurking around every tree. I heard if one walks on water, thou shalt drown in the sea. The reason will cause I'm fighting to free my family from this plantation of moderation, hateration of the generation.
A black rose then set me free. A black rose then set me free. A black rose then set me free. A black rose, free my soul. The black rose then set me free. A black rose then set me free. The black rose then set me free. A black rose, free my soul.
Time to be free,
Set me free.
time to be free,
Set me free.
time to be free,
Set me free.
time to be free.
Set me free.
Black rose, black rose, black rose, black rose, black rose, black rose. Tickety tacky, time's up on hourglass. It's time to raise hell on us aftermath. While Willie's still lynching the youth them, so we won't speak the truth them. Well, the truth is that they fearing us. We awaken, so they scared of us. Third eye rebel, make an impact like Mozart. No destroying us with the heart of a lion. Words of Zion, as I stand as a lone wolf. Respect the hunter or respect the shooter. Either one, there's no survivors. My mind is always high wired. Fried frequency, no noose. Just a shot of Grey Goose. The real meaning of feeling loose.
A black rose then set me free. A black rose then set me free. A black rose then set me free. A black rose, free my soul. The black rose then set me free. A black rose then set me free. The black rose then set me free. A black rose, free my soul.
Time to be free.
Set me free.
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 Black rose, black rose, black rose, black rose, black rose, black rose, black rose.
We are back.
We are
in the
back. We
second
are back.
half. And we're gonna go straight into it. As always, once we start these conversations, there's so much more that comes up, and there's so much more to say.
Welcome back to episode 1, Racial Equity in America. And we've been talking about all types of tales. We have our special guest, Mr. Jeremy Britton, with us. And what I have going back into this, right? Do you have any examples of when you felt you were treated differently because of who you are, speaking racially?
And who are you?
Right, because we got a little brief of how I felt about race and how Nuss felt. And
Got it. Well, so who am I? I identify as a Black American, born and raised in the South Memphis, Tennessee. So that can kind of give you an idea of how I identify as a Black American. And to answer that question, and I know, we spoke about this a little earlier, and the intention wasn't to keep the conversation on this, but to answer the question, it actually goes back to, just being a Black man and interactions with the police. Especially since I've been up here in New York, believe it or not, there have been some interactions that have been less than pleasant, and I know it's the case because as a Black man, there's an automatic criminalization that's put on my back, and I don't think I've really shared this with anybody. Maybe 2 people at this point even know about this, but probably about 5 or 6 months ago, was driving in the Bronx, car, tinted windows, so that's something else that makes you a criminal, and get pulled over. I'm like, not speeding, didn't run a red light, why exactly am I being pulled over? The 3 of us who are in the car, we have to sit on the trunk of the car as the police searched the vehicle looking for weapons. What I did, you know, to give the inclination that I had a weapon,
Right.
to this day, still no clue. And these are the type of interactions with the police that have, you know, happened multiple times, even since I've been up here in New York. And, you know, growing up as a black man down south, you know, we just know these things. You know,
Right.
there are certain areas you don't frequent. You know, you try to stay away from these particular areas. You try to stay away from these interactions. But it's ironic for me. Just I come up into this liberal city.
And then this,
Exactly. It seems to be, at least from my experience, seems to be worse. I can remember last year as well, a time being pulled over, you know, for speeding, and again, we're out of the car, you know, car being searched. And of course, you know, if I was Kyle, you know,
Right.
that that would not
Yeah.
happen.
So the one thing that I kind of, as you bring that up, I remember being on the phone with Jarrell before, and like the cops pulling him over, and me personally just being on the other end of the phone call, feeling this panic and this trauma just around it, like, oh shit. But what comes up for me now that you're saying that story, for those of you who do know Jeremy, right, you're usually this very clean cut, good looking man, light skinned, right? So I just in talking about privilege, right? Even within black men, there's different levels of privilege. And I think sometimes, you know, people like to say like, oh, it's only a specific looking group of black men that would get pulled over and then judged for maybe having weapons or whatever, right? And that's not the case,
Not at
right?
all.
So just
Exactly,
really
not at all.
just pointing that out just a little bit, because there are people who believe that, right? There's this like notion that if I look a certain way, or not every black man gets pulled over, right? Like not every black man is dealing with this. So even when we're talking about perspective, there's the perspective of the person experiencing it and the person who's also affected because that person's experiencing it, right? So like, and I can imagine, like, I don't even know what your mothers are like and stuff like that. That's just me as your friend
Oh
on
yeah,
the phone,
man.
right?
Those are so much deeper conversations to have with how that resonates. So now we're talking about an incident, you getting pulled over for bullshit, and now that immediately affects somebody else on the phone with me. If I was on the phone with my mom, it'd be the same thing. Now we got a shockwave of concern and worry just because I got pulled over. You know, and there are a lot of people in this country who don't experience that same kind of concern. They see police in a very heroic manner. They never fuck with me. You know, I know friends who have never been pulled over. And I'm like, how the fuck did that happen? Like, how have you done that?
And it's funny you say that, because I know folks, you know, who don't look like us, who when they get pulled over, they can talk back to the police.
Actually, that happened. This is while we were actually at residential, and we went out on one of our Walmart runs at 2 a.m. and just driving all over the place. Happened to be, it's a car full of minorities, but the driver was white. And so when the cops pulled us over and they see the white, you know, the white man driving, all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're just lost. Like, it was really like, we're lost. I'm like, oh, okay, well, Walmart is this way. And that was that. And that was, but the rest of us, like, we're all freaking out. We're like, oh my God, what the hell? We're in Pennsylvania right now. What is happening?
Ooh, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do want to say this because again, we were speaking earlier about rotten apples and good apples. There have been plenty of times as well where, you know, I've been pulled over and I've had that type of experience as well.
Right.
So I do want to highlight that. However, you know, these other
The bad experiences
exactly,
out there.
exactly.
Yeah, I've ran into cool cops. I've gotten let go a few times. This is after learning a way to be with them, and it's like, I hate to say that, but even if I wasn't black, you know, there's a way to be if I'm not alpha white male. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm not the white guy, if you're a white woman, there's a way to be. If you're a Bengali, if you're brown, there's a way to be. So I had to learn it after some time. And then we go into the realm of energy and what kind of energy you're giving off to people. And then I've also been in a situation where you're with somebody and you're like, yo, shut up, chill, chill, not now. Like, and you see the officer like want to let you go home. And, like, so I understand. That's why we really not need to. We are going to explore that because it affects everybody. You know, I'm going to take that moment to jump in about how when we started Iron Perspective, it came on the heels of conversations about Black Lives Matter. You know, it wasn't the only thing, but that was a main conversation we were having. And to me, as a black man, I was saying, like, this is a American problem. This is an American issue, the issue with police officers and how they're dealing with citizens, not black folks. Specifically us. But how is this not a thing for everybody? Why does everybody feel excluded from this? Like, you guys deal with that. And you're like, no, this is, they police everybody, you know? And from that, it became, well, we really need to get people to see these perspectives. We have so many stories, and our culture, it oozes these experiences, but like, I think everybody just gobbles it up in this consumer, like, oh, let's party to it. But how do we really have these meaningful conversations?
Because there's countries out there that have very effective policing, right? And I also just want to put out the perspective that it's not just America that has a policing problem. I think even the institution of why police were created in the first place, right? There's why were they created in every country, not just America, right? Because we're not the first ones to have police. But about 5 years ago, I was in Barcelona, and in terms of like how this is like a worldwide problem, in Barcelona they also have a police problem, right? And I can't tell you what it's like right now in this current day, but back then they definitely did. And there are two communities that came together. So I was going on this kind of like a back of the alley tour, right? Into neighborhoods that maybe, I don't know, I guess most people don't want to go into. But on this tour, there was a LGBT community, and they're right next to the Muslim community. And because of the police presence in both of their communities, I believe there was someone from each community that had recently been killed or attacked or whatever the case was. And so these two communities bonded in that trauma, like, you know what, no, this is not right. It had, you know, what I got to witness was this really long, beautiful mural of these two communities coming together that traditionally would not be seen together, right? There are very different things going on, and here they are because they realize that they also have a police problem. The police in Barcelona are not Barcelonians, but they're people who come from Catalonia, right? So they don't understand the city, they don't understand the people that they're policing. And so I think that's part of the problem that we face here too, is that they don't understand what it's like to police in certain communities. We have some interns who are not here with us today, but they're younger.
Those are online shots. Those are radio shots.
They're
Interns.
younger, and they recently expressed a perspective that we were very shocked to hear by. They said that the police are their friends, right? Certain precincts are their friends. Certain precincts are not their friends, but certain precincts were their friends. And I'm gonna actually let you speak more on that, because I think you were just like, what? Okay.
I mean, on one hand, it's like, okay, I don't want to infuse what I know on the youth. So if they have a great relationship with the police in Brooklyn where they're at, then maybe that denotes some change going on. But in the same breath, this young man is like, yeah, man, we cool with them, with these guys, the precinct over here. And then it's like, yeah, you know, but over in the other precinct, they shot my friend in the head, killed him. And it was this moment of somberness of like, a 18-year-old really not correlating the two, really wanting to feel protected by, and maybe, and again, that precinct is full with the good apples,
right?
You know?
They are interacting with the community, right?
Yeah, and then but then the next precinct, the next neighborhood over, for those who know New York, Brooklyn, we talking about the next precinct is a couple blocks over. They're murdering your friends, and it was just an interesting depiction of that young man. And that's why we also want to, like, we always talk about the events that we're gonna have because it constantly comes up, but like, what does it look like to have those 18-year-olds?
What I appreciate about that is that he's able to hold the cops differently based on, you know, whatever it is that his standards, right? Like, it's not that all cops are bad. So, right? So even that's a change in one direction. There's one precinct that's very willing to be involved in the community where these boys feel safe. Like, all right, you guys got our back. You're not after us. That itself is like an improvement that, you know, needs to be mentioned. I don't remember which precinct this is, but shout out to that precinct, right? As we are closing down, what do you believe needs to be enforced, or what needs to happen for us to have more of these shifts in conversation, right?
I think exactly what you all are doing is exactly what's needed. These conversations, they need to be had, they need to be front and center. They need to be done in such a way that, and I hate using the term call out because of the negative connotation associated with calling someone out, but really calling someone forward. Knowing that for many, these conversations may not be comfortable. For many, they may be downright challenging, but they're conversations that are needed to be had. You know, folks having the courage to come from a place of love and come from a place of radical love, knowing that that type of love may get messy, but putting it all on the table so that, you know, once we have these conversations, they can catalyze change. And one thing I really want to add to that, although the conversations may not be comfortable, doing them in a way that, you know, people may feel called for it, but they're not alienated as well. Because I think a trend that can happen is, you know, alienating and then alienating the group that alienated and going back and forth to the point where we're in this cycle that nothing changes. But doing it in such a way that at the end of the day, the conversation can be received and can be translated into different actions that catalyze change.
And I wanna tag on that to say that what we pride ourselves in the work that we do is that it is all inclusive. And that sounds kind of cliche, like everybody, but the basis of change, of empathy, of us as a collective, because we are going to have to do something about this shit going on. You know, like, we kind of know it and we see that it's happening, but like, how do we really get to that on a concrete level? And I think conversation is how we started, getting people, and it's not everything. It's not just conversation, but we're really excited to have as many conversations as possible and gain as many perspectives.
With that being said, it was a pleasure having you on with us today.
Thank you. The pleasure was all mine.
If you want to just give us a quick rundown, if you have anything that you're currently working on that you want to let our audience know about, please do.
Awesome. So last week I announced the launch of Impact. Impact is a professional development company that hosts workshops that allow individuals to really identify what's standing in their way of reaching their goals, giving them tools to move through those obstacles so that they can produce results in their life. And I can go into a long explanation of it, but I think that succinctly describes it. If you want to know more information about it, we're going to have our first workshop. It would be a 4-day workshop, 2 evenings and 2 days, February the 13th. You can visit us at iimpactonline.com. That's iimpactonline.com. And to find out information, our contact information as well. And that's about it.
Excellent. Thank you. So we can't thank you more for being our first guest.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me.
This is exactly the vision that we had, to give the platform to the people out here doing the work. But even if you're not, your perspective matters anyway. Hopefully we can get you up here and get more guests up here. So.
Follow us again. We'll be back here next Tuesday with The Power of Perspective. Next week we have a special episode where we get interviewed about our personal perspectives and why we started this organization. Once again, thank you. We have
www.iamperspective.com.
Yes, follow us.
And yeah.
Next show.
All right, that's what we're like looking for. All right.
Following this show, we have Speak Into Existence with May I Speak, right?
Excellent, excellent. Thank you very much for having us. Episode 1 in the books. Y'all have a great night.
All right.
Oh no, been so long since my medication, and I'm drowning in the pain. No, body soul, there's no separation.